Hello, everyone out there in Radio Land. It is once again that time of the week. Oh, what time of the week is it? It's that time of the week where we dig underneath the headlines. We talk about what the mainstream media is not talking about. We present you with a deft ear and analysis on local issues, national issues, and international issues from a leftist perspective. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. Now, as always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University, no matter how insightful or dope they may, in fact, turn out to be. So tonight, we're actually going to be having all co-hosts on deck. That's Nora and Lawrence. Lawrence will be joining us in just a few minutes.
And Nora's here.
Nora's here right now. That's right. Yeah. And boy, we've got a lot to start, or a lot to talk about on the show today. And you know what? We'll just do, Nora, a little bit of player's choice. Do you want to start with something local or national in scope?
Let's go with local to start with.
Let's go with local to start with. All right, great. And we've actually got a few stories this week that kind of all tie together, particularly under the umbrella of gentrification, which is a topic we talk about on the show quite often. And we've actually got some good news and some bad news, and we're going to try to unravel all these particular little pieces. Oh, we're getting a phone call. All right. Nora will be with you in just a second. So there's actually a little bit of good news, and I wanted to mention in particular an MLive article, a couple of MLive articles from Malachi Barrett. One about the Northside, in particular, getting some money to pursue an anti-gentrification strategy, while at the same time, the Hiltons are looking to build a hotel in downtown Kalamazoo, and
don't we already have a Hilton downtown?
Well, we've got a Radisson, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they're owned by. You know, I'll do some investigating right there, and also some discussion about how a church property is to be used here downtown, and there are a couple of stories locally that we want to talk about that aren't directly related to housing. Some concerns about a local elementary school principal, and an update about Isaiah, who is a young man. A young black man with mental health issues who was facing the prospect of being tried as an adult for an altercation he had with a KPS teacher. We'll be talking about those in a little bit, but let's go ahead and start with these kind of land and property issues, because again, they all fall under a very similar umbrella. So let's go ahead and start with the hotel story. The state approved $10.8 million for Hilton Hotel in downtown Kalamazoo. Now, already right off the bat, before I start reading from the article, again, that it really goes right down to the bedrock of a point we make on the show time and time again about federal dollars or, local tax money being used for projects that ultimately benefit the ultra-rich, and certainly the
state taxes.
In this case, state taxes. And in particular, okay, well, let me read a little bit from the article, and then we'll really dig and analyze the context. A $44 million hotel project in downtown Kalamazoo received millions of dollars in funding from the state of Michigan. The Michigan Strategic Fund approved $3.4 million in local and school tax capture and a $7.45 million Michigan Community Revitalization Program performance-based loan on Tuesday. Plaza Corp Realty Advisors, under the name Kalamazoo Hotel Partners LLC, plans to redevelop the historic 6-story Rose Street Market Building and an adjacent surface parking lot into a 118-room Hilton Garden Inn boutique hotel and 107-room extended stay home to suites by Hilton. The buildings are expected to be a total 153.5 thousand square feet, including 15,000 square feet of office space, an indoor pool, and elevated walkway across Eleanor Street. The project is expected to create 75 jobs and add vibrancy and density to downtown Kalamazoo, according to release from the MSF. So, wanted to talk a little bit about this in particular. So, okay. Again, the first part of the story, which I kind of balked at the beginning, the $10.8 million in state funds for the building of this new hotel. And again, if you visually picture it downtown, the site that they're talking about is literally about a block and a half away from the Radisson Plaza Hotel. And there is a real big question here is, when you build a second hotel like that, you are planning the need for extra capacity. And that's what a lot of like building like this boils down to, is like, are you expecting extra capacity in your community? But here's the question: extra capacity for whom? Now, obviously and honestly, the Hilton is for a particular class demographic. It is for, upwardly mobile, upper middle class to lower upper class types. And again, bespeaks to a prioritization on kind of, visiting business personages and people who are coming into town to make various business deals. And again, time and time again, when discussions are brought up about what to do with a lot of these properties downtown, affordable housing, affordable housing, affordable housing, it is bespoken again and again and again. I've cited this example often, but it comes in very handy for situations like this. I remember about a year and a half ago going to a public meeting about the building, the old firehouse, kind of a kitty corner from Papa Pete's. And it was a community meeting, community trying to decide what to do with it. And over again, people were saying, turn it into like some, make affordable living apartments, maybe incentivize the businesses you build down on the first level to hire in those people. Basically talking about building some kind of holistic housing project where you can uplift people in the community. 9 times out of 10, that's not what actually ends up happening. In particular, at that meeting, I remember Mayor Hopewell literally coming up to me and showing me like video of like outdoor markets in Brooklyn and these kind of ideas. And obviously it seems a little absurd when right around the corner is the Kalamazoo Mall. Why do you need more open air mall space next to the city's largest open air mall space?
Yeah. I mean, it's clear where the city's priorities are if they're gonna continue to ignore the people like this, when it couldn't be more obvious that we want affordable housing downtown, but we're not gonna get it because, as you said, there's a lot of rich businessy mofos that are trying to buy that place up, just like any other, city in the country. Downtown is the prices are getting jacked up, and they're gentrifying quickly if they haven't already, including and especially the areas around downtown.
Yeah, that's very true. And, I wanted to mention, too, like Plaza Corp, they own a lot of the businesses downtown. So it's really no surprise, like, who's kind of flexing their muscle to make this happen, the kind of clientele they want to drive in. Now, I'm not going to necessarily hate on those businesses for these tactics. I mean, it's, again, you could draw in a broader critique of capitalism. As they're trying to increase their market share, they appeal to people at points they sell to, and a lot of the businesses downtown are ostensibly geared towards that sort of if not necessarily wealthy, basically upwardly mobile liberals with disposable cash. And I believe that's our other co-host knocking right now. So again, when we complain and critique, where tax money goes to, again, why does the Hilton Corporation need $10 million from the state of Michigan to build a second luxury hotel 2 blocks away from one that we already got? And, it says 75 jobs into the community. There are other ways to bring more jobs into the community while also opening up more space for affordable housing.
State money for 75 jobs.
It really is. It really, and that's not even the whole total. Like 10.8, that figure is fairly small compared to Plaza Corp themselves. They're investing about $44 million in total, and they're also getting $3.4 million from the Michigan Strategic Fund, which again, those are local taxes, and also that taxes that are often raised for schools, and $7.45 million from the Michigan Community Revitalization Program. And I mean, it's like, it sounds like, it reminds me of Patriot Act or right to work. It's like these Orwellian buzzwords are the opposite of what they really mean, because like that $7.45 million, like, what community is that revitalizing? 'Cause when you're talking about downtown, they're doing their best to make sure there's no like actual community there. That it's basically just this visitors tourist spot for people who come out of town to work and do business deals, but who don't actually live here. So yeah, like, what community is being revitalized? That ain't revitalization. That's basically giving people who already own Cookie Mountain an extra plate of chocolate chip cookies. That's what that is.
It's rich gentrification, man. Like, that's it is rich gentrification in a city that needs a housing first initiative for low income Americans, and that's the tall and short of it. It's the same reason why we talked about building a new stadium in Kalamazoo was ridiculous, when we have Wing Stadium and we have all the other event places in Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo is supposed to be a microbrewery hub. We have the Harvard of the Midwest here in K College. We have Western Michigan University. It's supposed to be a tourist trap, and keyword is trap. It's a trap for those that are already the mice stuck there, and it is a trap for those that benefit from what's ever caught. So I mean, it's infuriating when we go to. I don't know if y'all saw Shannon Sykes show the letter that she got from the talking about the homeless encampment.
Oh,
from the board on Monday. Mm-hmm. In that letter shows you exactly how the people who run our city feels about us. So them building another fancy hotel when you have the Comfort Inn, the Radisson, and all of the other major fancy hotels that's on Westnedge and off of Sprinkle as well, shows you how they actually feel about the people who live here. Because I guarantee you, a lot of people who's going to be doing the construction or working and operating in said hotel on a consistent basis probably will not come from the neighborhoods that hotel will be occupying.
Yeah, it's funny, like, we were talking about that a little last week.
Oh, yeah, Wild Lawrence has appeared, everybody.
Yeah.
Hi, Lawrence.
Yeah. But yeah, we were talking a little bit about that last week with that one particular business, investment business opening a location on the north side. Traditionally, they hire business professionals who are part of their particular milieu. They do not hire local personnel. And again, the hotel, I suppose. They'll be very selective. This is like 75 jobs we're talking about here, which really is not that many. But again, it's you're gonna probably get a few more low wage jobs in the downtown area, but not like in the grand totality, not a whole lot better. And I'd be remiss to wonder how much these new jobs are going to pay and how much more mileage you could have gotten out of instead of taking that $10 million and giving it to the Hilton, maybe investing in some local businesses or local,
or we could or realizing the fact that we had to build warm shelters during the polar vortex. So let's build some affordable housing in these places so that the homeless and people who are homeless in our fair city will not freeze to death. Mm-hmm. Like, can we? Because we act like a storm like that will not happen again in Michigan. We live in Michigan. Like we there was a report talking about how Chicago's been affected by the polar vortex and how the storms here are only going to get worse.
They had to light the trains on fire so people could still ride them in Chicago.
Again, so my point again, that goes back to the point that we're making. It makes more sense to put money into the proletariat by not just creating jobs that are living wage jobs, but also providing housing and affordable housing, rent control, mortgage control, type of legislation and a housing first initiative, instead of building another luxury hotel that's literally blocks away from another luxury hotel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And with that, I'd like to transition a little bit. This next story is under kind of a similar umbrella, but it's potentially some good news. Potentially. I especially wanted to get your take on this, Lawrence, because this is a neighborhood you live in. But the Northside, as we talked about at the top of the show, has gotten a $350,000 grant to pursue an anti-gentrification strategy. And I'll read a few excerpts from it, and then we'll talk about it in larger depth. A $350,000 grant from Kalamazoo City-operated Foundation for Excellence will help an urban neighborhood, the North Side, develop affordable housing. Monday, the City Commission approved a grant to the Northside Association for Community Development to purchase 7 properties. They're planning mixed-use development, which includes housing units, space for educational training, and commercial space for women and minority-owned businesses. Let's see. So, talking to the executive director, Maddie Jordan Woods, and said that
Miss Jordy, mm-hmm. I love Miss Woods. I love Miss Woods. She's a go-getter, and she's a very talented young African American woman. I mean, I call her young, but she's the same age as my parents. So I mean, but she's a very intelligent young woman. Mm-hmm. But I should not be calling her young. She's a grown ass woman. Oh, yeah. I'm trying to be as fundamentally respectful as I possibly can. But I think Miss Jordan is awesome.
And here's a great takeaway. This is just this block quote here. I don't think people should have to leave their neighborhood because they are poor. And I want to talk a little bit about what this actually boils down to and means. And we talked a little bit about the Hope Network and how they are going to be basically planning a tiny home neighborhood within the North Side for people with criminal backgrounds, substance abuse issues, and big kudos to that. And we did talk a little bit about just the necessity for those communities to be basically, trained up and given the experience to actually keep their homes intact.
You have to cut the check for those that are. You have to cut the check for those that are the least among us, so that they will help raise everyone else up to a better standard of dignity. When you do not, you sound like Glenn Greenwald when he was at CPAC talking about inequality is great. And and
Glenn Greenwald said that?
Glenn Greenwald went to CPAC. That's a whole nother conversation that we have to have, because he's still not Glenn Greenwald, Glenn Beck. It was
okay. I was gonna say
no. I'm sorry. I made it horrible. No.
Did
it wasn't
Bolsonaro
No. It wasn't Glenn Greenwald. I'm sorry. It was Glenn Beck. I apologize. Yeah, it wasn't Glenn Greenwald. It was Glenn Beck. So, but it was Glenn Beck going to CPAC talking about saying some outrageous stuff. But to talk about this initiative though. Gentrification. Okay, so let's break down so we have to break down the problem. We have to analyze the problem, and then we can talk about solutions to said problem. Gentrification is the grabbing and consolidating of land in poor, disenfranchised neighborhoods for the benefit of middle class to upper middle class to the rich white population of America. It is when we look at the federal redlining of Kalamazoo. If you were at the demonstration about how our federal government helped redline the Kalamazoo, especially Northside and Southside, how our federal government colluded with our state government and colluded with our city and made incentives to keep poor, disenfranchised people, especially people of color, in poor neighborhoods. It was policy that these people would have. It was policy that people of color, especially black people, would get higher interest rates. They would get higher loans, and that they were always looked at as renters and not owners. And when you continually have people who are renters in a neighborhood that they are being forced to live, they are being forced to live in, not by choice, but because of necessity, because the jobs that they are getting is not providing them with enough actual equity to move out. You have this situation where the property of said area now starts becoming more valuable. So when we start developing more things in their entertainment district, in the district in downtown Kalamazoo, the closest neighborhoods to that area of the entertainment district and things of that nature is the North Side. Is the North Side, and it's also the South Side. These are the closest neighborhoods to the downtown area where they want people to spend their money and spend their time in the entertainment industries. But problem is, there's black folks that live over there. So since there are black folks over there and we want that land, we are going to buy up this land, which we've already had condemned buildings. We've had poor, disenfranchised people living there. And these are in the North Side. The overwhelming majority of the North Side is working class poor. Are people who make less than $30,000 a year. Some people make more because they have other multiple hustles, but they are the proletariat. They are working class people. They just happen to be black. So that is the issue. We're going to take up land. We're going to take up land and housing for people who are working their fingers to the bone, probably working more than 40 hours a week to live in places that they do not own, that they are renting. And we are going to rent this stuff to people who are choosing to live in these areas by choice, not by necessity. So gentrification with gentrification, you can have jobs and other business opportunities that banking and small businesses that will start to crop up because the banks will give out said loans to white neighbors that live on the north side, where they would not give to black business owners that live on the north side, or small business owners that, because they live on the north side. It could be something as simple as me getting a loan to start a business. It could be something as simple as me ordering food. Rice Kitchen is literally less than a mile away from my house. I live on the north side. It's less than a mile away from my house. It will not deliver to me because I am north of North Street. So, but when I was with my at the time girlfriend, my ex now, but at the time girlfriend, and she lived on Westnedge, which was 3 miles away, they would deliver there all the time. So it goes to the reality of the situation that, yeah, having more white people or whatever living on the north side is fine, but not giving people the opportunity to buy the homes that they grew up in, or to be able to create wealth in their community and in their area, only goes further into disenfranchising those that are already struggling. So this grant, I believe, is a good thing. Because it's allowing people to be able to stay in the homes, to not just stay in the homes that they grew up in, but an overwhelming majority of black businesses are created because they take a second mortgage out on their houses. This is how a lot of small businesses are created. So I know I went on this long ass tirade. I'm sorry, but to get to the point, I think this is going to be a good thing. I want to see more details about how it will be implemented. What kind of housing units are they going to are they having? Can we spread this out, not just in these seven houses or whatever, but can it also be spread out to some of the older houses as well? Because we need affordable housing. And having a plan to make sure that people are going to be off the street helps people with their state of mind. It helps them to be able to have some type of stability to be able to become productive citizens. Because if you're struggling to think about where you're going to be sleeping at night, and you're struggling to worry about where you're going to be getting your next meal, then you might end up doing some things to make sure you have that security that may be detrimental to the community. So it's a snowballing thing, and it's a very complex thing that we have to have a nuanced solution for.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the only thing I'll really do is just add a few points. So specifically, and the article had like a real detailed breakdown of the kind of housing they're going to offer, but it's not popping up on my phone or on the computer right now. But a lot of some of the houses are going to be studios, but some of them are going to be like 2-bedroom apartments and other things like duplexes and other things, which the NACD has done before. They own houses that are behind the NACD building, which are nice houses. They are really nice houses. They're cheaper than some of the other places that you can rent. But home ownership is important, and it's a thing that's a part of, when I think of a black agenda, it's something that I care about a lot, because that was the way that because I just saw a study recently. Over 68% of wealth that's created that is passed on in this over 68% of wealth that is distributed in this country is passed on by families. So the richest people in the world, the 1%, a majority of them got their wealth is because someone left them money, and that created generational wealth. That's how you got the Walmarts, because the Walmart heirs didn't become billionaires. They didn't become billionaires because they worked for it. Their parents left them the money. Our president wasn't
didn't start off rich. His father left him money, and that created generational wealth. That was never the black people were never allowed that luxury because we were never able to own anything.
That's right, and one of the things that really, so there's two things that really strike me is like this is very legit, and I'm very this is what makes me think there's really some good news. Is one, when we're talking about, because we've joked a lot about how some of these affordable housing initiatives are tied into like the median income of the broader city. So you'll have like quote unquote $2,000 apartments that are affordable. Affordable to whom is a good question, but they actually do tack it to a working class figure here, $14,500 a year.
Hey.
It's basically affordable to people making 30% of the median income. And that translates to roughly about $400 a month for rent in a loft style home. And I saw like some of the figures.
It's pretty affordable.
Yeah. I saw some of the figures for like the studio apartments were $350. So these are actually priced for working class people, which is a really nice departure from some of the kind of laughable efforts we've seen. And exactly to reaffirm what you're saying, Maddie Jordan Woods, she said the only way to stop gentrification and protect neighborhood residents from being priced out is to control the land.
Well, it's also, but you also got to look at we have to be I don't want to say pragmatic about it, but we have to look at the reality of the situation. When we look at the wealth disparity between white families and black families, it's 10-1. The average white family in America owns around $100,000 when it comes to assets. The average black family owns around 10, and that's not including the fact that
$10.
$10,000 in assets. Mm-hmm. So that's the reason why it's 10-1. The other aspect that we also have to look at is that a lot of people, we bring it up all the time. Half the country makes less than $30,000 a year. So if I'm spending 50% or more of my check on rent, on just rent alone, when will I have a chance to put that money in the bank for a savings for anything else? If a $400 emergency will send me into bankruptcy. That's the reason why you have to have mortgage control, rent control, and we have to check the banks like One West Bank in California that was kicking people out of their houses unfairly. That was robbing people, and we have to check this. And if we don't. Then the same neighborhoods that during white flight that white people were moving out of to get away from black people are now the same neighborhoods they're trying to buy up because it's easier for them to save their money and then give something back to their children when they're gone, which is the same thing that black people want to do. Mm-hmm. That's all it is. It's social justice means that I want the same thing for myself as I want for you. That means I want the same opportunity, not outcome. Because I know right wingers will say that we want outcome, and I'm not that far left, and there's not a lot of people who's far left that actually say that BS. We want the same opportunity to give our family something better than what we had. That's what every American wants. You know what I'm saying? And to not understand that or not realize how we should do that with policy like this is how we move forward to build that up. I mean, it's a discussion that we should be having, and a lot of people don't see it. But
I'm with you on that, and you really do bring up a good point that like owning property, as in like buying a house, is like a really great way to build generational wealth. And if the leaders of our city really do want to go off the rhetoric of the services like the nonprofits we have in town lift people out of poverty, then let's see it happen for a change. Let's hopefully that maybe I think the next step in anti-gentrification efforts beyond this, and continuing to do more of the same, of course, would be to make it easier for people to get mortgages. And you really can't go off the $45K median salary in the city if, like you said, most of the country makes under $30K a year.
The majority of people that in Kalamazoo don't even make majority of people who work 40 hours a week in Kalamazoo do not make that much money.
No,
Not
at all.
And if you saw the town hall with Bernie Sanders, the Bernie Sanders town hall that he had, it was I think it was workers versus CEOs. A staggering statistic that still haunts me to this day is 47% of homeless people in America work full-time jobs. 45%, not 47. It was 45%. 45%. A study, I think it was a Gallup poll or a Pew Poll research poll that showed that 45% of homeless Americans in America have a full-time job.
Just anecdotally, like when I was volunteering during the Code Blue emergency, when we got the churches to be emergency shelters during the polar vortex, the top request I got from the homeless population when I was doing overnights there was, "Can I get a wake-up call for work?" So
right, because it was either. So it was either, what was I gonna do? I was gonna either sleep in my car and freeze to death, or I could go to this homeless shelter. But tomorrow morning, I still have to wake up and go to work.
Yeah.
Like, I still have to wake up and go to this 9 to 5. That's probably not that probably does not pay me enough to live in the place where I need to be. And that's not. And I understand that we have private that apartment buildings still need to there's waiting lists for different apartment buildings and different apartment places, and rent and mortgages have gone up significantly. But at the same time, if these things have gone up when it comes to inflation, that also means that the incomes of these people should be also going up as well, and it's not.
All right, so I'm gonna push the break to 45 because there's just like one last kind of question I wanted to ask y'all about this news story. So at the top of it, it mentioned like a 350 grand of this is coming from the Foundation for Excellence. Now, obviously,
For
time.
Hilton or for the...
No, for the anti-gentrification thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I think, long-time listeners know we've been critical of the foundation itself. Of course, in our fears that, this could spur gentrification, and there's been certain examples of it. You can reasonably say it has. What do y'all think this means in the broader context of the foundation? I kind of have my own take on it, and like the ability of grassroots movements to push kind of reactionary structures to quote unquote do the right thing. But I think there is somewhat of an irony that a lot of this money that is going towards solutions that we talk about, the idea of buying up land for the community, buying up its own land, has been like a tactic in a lot of really strong grassroots areas that go by socialist principles. I'm thinking a lot of Jackson, Mississippi in particular. But just kind of that internal contradiction there. What y'all might think about it?
Well, I mean, it's that's the duality of America. You have companies that will do the right thing, not because it's the morally right thing to do, it's because it's the financially right thing to do. You see, it's the same thing that when we talked about Nike doing the thing with Colin Kaepernick after the whole Super Bowl thing, because they realized that if they went against Colin Kaepernick and the things that he stood for, that they were going to lose money. That doesn't stop the fact that they have sweatshops that makes their shoes. It doesn't stop the fact that they are exploiting cheap labor overseas. It doesn't stop the fact that majority of their shoes are not made in America. But they chose to side with someone who's fighting for social justice because they saw that the killings of black people, and that this is what this man is standing for, and that's where the money that they're going to give him is going to go towards. So they're going to get good pub for it, and they're going to make more money off of it because of it. If they made a nickel less backing Colin Kaepernick than they were going to make not backing him, they would have never did it. It's the same thing with the Foundation of Excellence. Whatever gripes that we may have about the Foundation of Excellence, they're doing this for what they're doing now to help put some of the money towards this can be looked at as cynical, and could be looked at as they're doing this for their own financial benefit or whatever. But at the same time, it's still helping out families who are disenfranchised. That's right. So at the same time, I can. It's the same way that I criticize the mainstream. We criticize the mainstream media all the time. Mm-hmm. There are times when the mainstream media does some wonderful news, which we'll probably get to, and then there's times when the mainstream media is completely on some BS, which we rip apart. Yeah. So I mean, it's the duality of our lives. It's the gray area in our lives. Not everything is as black and white as we would want them to be, and not everything has to be as black and white. There are gray areas with it. But at the same time, if the Foundation of Excellence starts putting more money into this, so that we can have more families owning the houses that they are living in, or owning the areas that they're living in, and they can put more money into more housing first initiatives like this, so that we have the NACD and other advocates for Northside or whatever, helping to build that generational wealth in our community that will help the overall community in Kalamazoo. So I see it as a good thing. Now, is that going to stop us from ripping apart the Foundation of Excellence if they do some malarkey later this year or later next year? No, like it's absolutely not. And just like how I talk about Kamala Harris or Cory Booker and some of the other people, or Bernie Sanders. Like, I have a gripe with Bernie Sanders that we're gonna have to talk about later in this episode. Mm-hmm. So, as much as I give people praise, you have to hold them accountable for when they mess up.
Mm-hmm. Nora?
So I am indeed pleasantly surprised that the Foundation for Excellence funds, it was used to do something that would help people that are struggling and in poverty. I can't think of any specific example of what they might have done recently to gentrify the city, but it is an interesting coincidence that a lot of the new construction developments downtown started happening sometimes after. But there's part of me that wonders if this grant towards the anti-gentrification on the Northside efforts would have happened had it not been for people like us consistently criticizing the Foundation for Excellence and demanding that it be used on things that actually serve the community.
Yeah, that's very true. And, I think even like the makeup of the foundation board, and granted, there are some control issues, and I'd really like to one of these shows really go into the nuts and bolts of how the foundation board works, but the representation on the board are generally above board people in the community we've worked with, and to
certainly better than I was expecting from them.
Oh yeah, and to the extent that they can exert their influence is a direct result of pressure put on the formation of the foundation to pick those sorts of people with those sorts of ideas. I think generally I would just echo a lot of what you and Lawrence said. And I think once again, I want this to be an abject lesson. Like, this is the power of grassroots organizing. This is what happens when you put pressure on people in power, because we couldn't. That result didn't have to happen. I remember a city commission meeting I was at, I think it was about a year ago. Jack Urban didn't know the meaning of gentrification. He didn't know what it meant. And, not to pick on Jack, but it's kind of a lesson how, a lot of people in power who maybe are not outright malicious, are also just very ignorant of the problems that working class people have to deal with.
I mean, it's the same thing when you saw it happen in Flint. Not to cut you off, I'm sorry for cutting you off. But it's the same thing that happened in Flint when you heard people say, well, if their houses are being poisoned, why don't they move? Yeah. So yeah, what's the property? How much property value am I going to have by selling a house that has poison water? It's that kind of ignorance that you will see from people who don't have to worry about if they're going to pay a bill on time, or if they're or what they're going to be eating for dinner that night, or where are they going to sleep that night to be safe. When you don't have to worry about being safe or knowing that you're going to be able to get home that night, when you don't have to have those constant fears, then you move differently. And if you've never had to deal with that, if you've never seen that, then you don't operate in the space where you understand that there are more people who are living in that type of situation than the one that you're living in.
Yeah, that's right. And I think with that, let's go ahead and take a little break. Y'all listen to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
What's up, everybody? It's RJD2, and you're listening to 89.1 WIDR FM, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
It may not be apparent, but hunger is a rather prominent issue amongst the student body of Western. The Invisible Need Project is a multifaceted initiative that's aimed to help struggling students. Every 2 weeks, generous people donate their food to the pantry located in the Fawn Student Service buildings or other drop-off locations. All you need to do is grab a reusable bag and grab whatever food you need to help sustain yourself. If anyone's unsure when their next meal will be, or if you have a little extra food you'd be willing to donate, the food pantry is your place. If you're looking to help donate, become a volunteer, or just learn more, call 269-387-4742 or email dosa-inp@wmich.edu for details.
WIDR's 2019 Battle of the Bands is supported by Rupert's Brewhouse. Rupert's is located on 773 West Michigan Avenue in Kalamazoo. Rupert's offers daily specials on food and drink, as well as live entertainment weekly. To find out more information, you can visit rupertsbrewhouse.com or give them a call at 269-337-9911.
You need your token black person to say.
So, actually, I tuned in just as you said that last week. So, you didn't know. We're about to talk about reparations.
I mean, dog. I mean, it needs to be a conversation to be talked about, man. The movement, ADOS, American descendants of slaves, have been wanting to have this conversation permeate the ether of American discourse. And if you go to their website, ados101.com, they have a black agenda that actually talks about what reparations is, what their black agenda is. I encourage people to go and check it out because it is a real thing, despite what Joy Reid and Angela Rye and others may say, that these are not black people who are Russian bots. These are black people who actually have platforms, a platform that they have thoroughly researched and talked about, and it is a very interesting conversation, and something that needs to be talked about much more openly. Case in point, you've had multiple people go on different shows like The Breakfast Club to talk about reparations. Bernie Sanders went on The View and The Breakfast Club talking about reparations. When Charlamagne the Guy asked him, when they asked him, does he have a black agenda, he did lay out what's a part of his platform that's a black agenda, addressing redlining, addressing health disparities when it comes to health care, criminal justice reform, free college and tuition. Bernie just went through his platform. When it came to reparations, Bernie said he asked, what's the definition of reparations that you're talking about? And when it got to the bare basics of cutting a check for black folks, not just the things that Bernie was talking about of addressing said systemic issues, but also cutting a check, Bernie said that he was not for it. He said nah, because that would also open up a Pandora's box for other minorities as well. And he said that we need to address the systemic issues of inequality in America before and to address the systemic issues in America would be better than just cutting a check. I personally disagree with Bernie Sanders on this issue. I think that addressing the issues and cutting a check are both things that need to be done at the same time. It's not one or the other. It's not a we need to do one more than the other. We have to do both. And that's the thing that I disagree with him on. But I'm happy in his honesty, because a lot of other people have been getting a credit for this issue that do not deserve credit. Cory Booker went on the Breakfast Club and talked about how he supports reparations, and he was talking about baby bonds, basically that families, black families and other families, as their babies, they will get a bond from the government, and that bond will grow over time, kind of like a Gerber Life Fund type thing. That's not reparations. It is a great policy. It's a fantastic policy. It's not reparations. Kamala Harris talked about her stipend. Families that make less than $100,000 will get a tax stipend between $500 and $1,000 that they will get every month from the government. It's basically universal basic income for people who make less than $100,000. But also, it's great policy. It will affect over 68% of black folks in America. It's fantastic policy. It's not reparations. Elizabeth Warren also talked about how she would support reparations, and she talked about how she would address redlining in our communities. But it had nothing to do about cutting a check. Is it great policy? That's when she's talking about banking reform and redlining. Yes, it's fantastic policy when you actually go to our website and read it. It's not reparations.
This is really my biggest question too, is like listening all the presidential candidates in the field suddenly start talking about reparations when, it feels to me like they're just kind of throwing these ideas at a dartboard. And, granted, these are all, like you said, these are all well thought out policies. But to me, I wonder, there's been work on this for decades. This question of like what reparations should be, what those should look like. Those are discussions that black grassroots activists have been having for decades, and it feels like, did anybody check in with them?
Well, and that's the issue that I have is that a lot of let's call the one. Let me just talk about the reason why this is being brought up. Outside of the fact that you had black activists talk about this, and you had people like ADOS and other groups also talk about reparations, and the fact that this is a bill that's been due. This is debt that has been due in the black community since slavery, since Jim Crow, since Jim Crow, which was basically apartheid in America, since mass incarceration and the drug war and how it negatively affected our community. So it's a moral, ethical, and I would argue economic responsibility that America has to the black community. Even back in 2016, the United Nations said that America owes black Americans reparations. So
that's correct.
Right.
The United Nations said that it owes black Americans reparations specifically for slavery and mass incarceration, which is still happening to this day.
So is it something that we should be talking about, and is it something that should be a part of the Democratic platform? Yes. This is also the reality. It's polling at 32% in America because people have not defined what it actually is.
Yeah,
that's the main reason why. When we talked about Medicare for All, people understood what Medicare for All was, and when it was first being talked about, it polled at 51%. The reason why it polls so low is because people haven't gave a clear definition of what reparation looks like. There has been 3 candidates, in my opinion, in the presidential field that has talked about reparations in a substantive manner. Bernie talked about it in his town hall with CNN. Talked about how he supported John Connor's bill, H.R. 40. Tulsi Gabbard is a co-sponsor of that bill, and she is someone who I absolutely love, and I'm glad that she's a co-sponsor of the bill. The bill looks at researches and looks at what 40 acres and a mule and what reparations would look like in today's modern sense. It's John Connor's bill. He's been putting the bill in ever since 1995. And Marianne Williamson, who is also running for president, for the presidency of the Democratic Party. Most people probably do not know who Marianne Wilson is. She is an author. She's one of Oprah's really good friends. She is a wonderful speaker, and I read her last book. No one knows her, but when you actually listen to her talk about reparations, she's the only candidate that actually has an actual policy plan. And she makes substantive arguments for why we should be putting it on the platform. Her plan, her policy for reparations is giving $100 billion over the next 10 years to the black community by putting a coalition of black leaders and that will then take said money and give that and put that money into the organizations that will positively affect black Americans. I think, in my opinion, that policy is a half measure, because you still need the proletariat, which is black people that's descendants of slaves. You still need to give them a check. There was a Duke study that was done. I forgot the year, and I forgot the lady who wrote it. But there was a Duke study that was done that's called 40 Acres and a Mule in 21st century. And it basically broke down that if we looked at reparations for American descendants of slaves today, that the American government owes African Americans around, each African American in America, around $400K. So if we were going to actually make that policy of hers a reality by giving black people a paying towards this debt that they owe us, and it was only $100 billion out of the GDP, $100 billion out of the GDP that we have in America. That means every black person in America, because there's around 38 billion of us, will get around $2,600 in a check each year or each month, at least between each month and each year. I find that being a half measure. I find it being a half measure because I think that it does address the fact that yes, people who are starving, who need money to be able to provide for their families, need financial support. They need that check. But at the same time, if they just get the check without fixing redlining, racism when it comes to healthcare, student loan debt, the prison industrial complex when it comes to taxes,
school to prison pipeline.
Yeah, the school.
We're going to be talking about a little bit.
No. But again, those systematic racist policies will not be fixed by just giving a check. Those policies need to be fixed, which Bernie Sanders has addressed in a lot of his policies. Universal Medicare for all, free college and tuition, addressing redlining. Elizabeth Warren has the anti-corruption bill, which is by far one of the best legislations that is out there. And even Andrew Yang talking about universal basic income. I absolutely love his policy. Who's also running for the Democratic nomination, even though his education policy is absolutely ridiculous. It's basically Obama's and Hillary's old plan about stipends and stuff.
I haven't heard of Andrew Yang or this author. Like,
Andrew
how
Yang,
many more people have announced they're running without us knowing?
There's no. There's a lot of people. There's around 15.
The Democratic playing field is basically going to be like the Smash Brothers roster by the time we get to the debates.
There's like 15 people that's running. That's announced right now. But let me be clear. The reason why this is being brought up is because if you remember back in 2016, Tom Perez and the DNC needed to have an angle to fight against Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders was popular amongst women and millennials. So after, and also because back in 2015 and 16, only political junkies like ourselves actually knew who Bernie Sanders was, but most of the country did not. They weaponized identity politics against him, saying that the idea about Bernie bros, that his supports are white males and that Hillary had black supporters. So what are they using to weaponize against Bernie Sanders again? That he's doing bad against black people. I mean, he's doing bad. He has bad policy against black people, so they're using this to weaponize against him to say, hey, look, these other candidates have a more left-wing policy than Bernie Sanders, and it's tailored towards the black community. Shouldn't you have someone who's better for you than Bernie Sanders? The reason why they're doing that is because the biggest voting bloc in the Democratic Party is black women. So you're weaponizing identity politics against someone who has a better political agenda and has a history of fighting for black folks. And if you look at any recent polling, Bernie Sanders' biggest supporters are still women and people of color. So they're weaponizing this policy against Bernie. But at the same time, they're not holding everyone else to that same high standard. And everyone else that has been giving answers to the question, they say that they represent, that they support it in name, but they support it. But when you look at their policies, their actual policies to address reparations, it's only reparations in name only because their policies do not represent what they're talking about.
Right. Nora, so I know you wanted to chime in.
So I did go to ADOS101.com, and it does bring up some very specific by the numbers reasons why we do need these systemic issues being solved and the check being written, so to speak, in the first place. So yeah, again, it's at ADOS101.com if you want to know more about this. I really am glad this is a discussion that is being brought back up into the public, and I hope that I can gain more of a popular approval. Although I am disappointed it's under the guise of the establishment trying to hit Bernie over the head with disingenuous identity politics. However, I do hope that we get to see both in our lifetimes. I do hope that something similar is able to be done for the black folks in this country who aren't necessarily descendants from slaves, who immigrated from other parts of the black diaspora, because they're still going to make a significant portion of our population. There's still a lot of them in this country right now that are underdocumented.
Mm-hmm. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's still a lot of nuance that has to be done when we talk about reparations. We have to talk about the one drop law that was in America, where if you are white and you had a drop of black blood in you, that you were considered black. We also have to have a conversation about the not just the amount of what that check will be, but what other things that are a part of the black agenda. And the thing that's pissing me off, especially when it comes to black people who are just writing people off, saying that if we don't get reparations, you're not getting my vote, is that you're being short-sighted because you're not looking at the entire you're not looking at the entire situation of what's going on with the black community. Reparations is not the soul of the black agenda. It is a part of the black agenda. And if you are only focused on now, and I agree, and this is the reason why I disagree with Bernie. Bernie's platform is based off of Martin Luther King's democratic socialist ideals.
That 100%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Martin Luther King always said, and he said in multiple speeches, even in the I Had a Dream speech, that he was going to Washington to get that check. And when he was talking about getting that check, he was talking about he wasn't just talking about civil rights and us being treated as human beings, but the redistribution of wealth back to the black community. So this is why, and when it comes to substance and policy, I get why Bernie has the stance that he has, but he's also wrong when it comes to not looking at, not look at or acknowledge that a check will need to be paid. I can't tell you what the check should actually be. I can't I as of right now cannot tell you what the check will actually be. I do like the Duke study that says it should be $400K to every black family, but it's also addressing the healthcare racism in our healthcare, the racism in the school system, as we also have to deal with redlining the legalization of marijuana, because he also said that he's for the legalization of marijuana, but he doesn't guarantee that a majority of those businesses or black businesses that should crop up because of marijuana, or the revenue that's created from taxing marijuana, will not go back into the black community, which is wrong. And this is one of the other things that for Bernie I feel like is wrong. I am happy that he's for the legalization, taxation, and regulation of marijuana. But if you're not going to put the money and revenue from taxing marijuana back into the communities that was devastated from the war on crime, then you are systematically still suppressing the people that were devastated by the war on crime.
Keep in mind that the current owners of the legal marijuana businesses today, 80% of them are white.
Yeah. Oh, it's a gross.
A decent amount of them are from the same people who supported the drug war.
And that's the point that I'm getting at. I'm glad that you brought that up, and I'm sorry for cutting you off. There was a story 3 weeks ago, and they compared legalization of marijuana in California, where you had a white housewives. You had white housewives that were selling edible gummies, and they made $1 million business from selling edible gummies in California. Meanwhile, in Compton, I think they were in Sacramento, California, or somewhere in the Bay Area. Meanwhile, in Compton, same state, legalized marijuana. You had hundreds of black and brown kids still being locked up for marijuana possession. And in southern states, you still have black people still being locked up for marijuana possession.
So, unless y'all we want to keep talking on this issue, I did want to kind of point this back towards an issue involving systemic racism right here in Kalamazoo. If y'all ready to transition to that particular topic.
All right, hold on. Just to put a pin on this, and this is the last thing I'm gonna say on this. I still support Bernie. Even though I think that he is wrong on these particular topics, I support Bernie because I believe that after Bernie gets after some research is done, after he sees some statistics and some data on said subject, I believe Bernie will be moved. Because he takes his money from small donors. And since he takes his money from small donors, I know that he will not be influenced by large multinational corporations that wouldn't be for it. I can't say that same thing for the other candidates, because I've seen the other candidates move on issues that should be non-negotiables. For me, a black agenda is non-negotiable, but also for me, a black agenda also includes reparations, but it also includes the other things that systemically oppress us in our community that needs to be addressed. He has half of it right. We gotta get him on that other half.
I agree, and from where I'm standing, I'm a little bit more radical and to the left. I kind of question electoralism in general, but I would agree with Lawrence. I don't think there's really anybody out there who has the right answer on the reparations question right now. And it's looking to me like we're gonna have. It's a strong possibility we're going to actually have a progressive center-left candidate this time, and those are people who can actually be pressured to do something about this issue.
I mean, you cannot have Ronald Reagan being the only person that gave reparations to Japanese internment camp victims and actually getting a check. And for those who do not remember, Ronald Reagan gave the victims of Japanese internment, and back in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan signed and passed a bill that the surviving members of those that were in the Japanese internment camps got $20,000. They each family of theirs got $20,000. So let's not act like we don't have precedent for this. Like the French government, the French and German government, both still to this day pay reparations to Israel and Jewish settlers that were victims of the Holocaust. France and Germany does not have a better economy than we do. So these type of arguments that say it's unfeasible or it's unethical or it's going to cost too much. Let me also remind you, the F-13 costs $1.7 trillion. It's a plane that doesn't fly.
So about the French and German economy, since they don't buy planes that don't fly, they actually spend their money on giving everybody health care. I would argue they have a better economy than we do.
But again, that's my point. If we have $1.7 trillion to spend on a plane that doesn't fly, that has not been in a theater of combat, and that does not fly when a thunderstorm is going on, then maybe we can take that same amount of money and give it to the people that arguably outside the Native Americans has been disproportionately discriminated against worse than any other group in America.
Look, all I'm saying, there will come a day when the American and Russian Air Force decide to reenact Top Gun. And when that happens, we will be happy that we have this expensive boondoggle jet fighter.
Could our military budget be pushed to doing a hot volleyball scene too?
Yeah. All I'm saying is that the Pentagon and law already lost $22 trillion. Maybe we can put some $22 trillion into some other stuff. Okay, that's all I'm saying.
So I did this next piece. I wanted to do a little bit of an update. We had actually Ed Genesis was on the show back in June. Was it back in June or July?
Something like that. It was a while ago.
This is over the summer. Talk about Isaiah Gathing. And to give y'all an if you don't remember the story, this was a young man, 15 years old at the time, has a mental health disorder, and basically was thrown in jail in juvie for getting into a physical altercation with his teacher that the teacher initiated. This kid. And this really strikes me, the intersection of, racial disparity and mental health issues. I'm somebody who's worked in the mental health field for about the last decade. So the process he went through was not normal for this kind of situation. Are
we really surprised? Like, we had a shooting of a mentally ill. We had the video of a black kid that got shot by the police, and the police lied and said that he was the aggressor when the videotape showed him running away. You had a black dude who was on the ground with his hands up because he was trying to calm down his mentally ill patient, and the cop shot him while he had his hands up, and he asked them, "Why did you shoot me?" And the cop said, "I don't know."
Exactly.
Like when you told me about this story, I was like, I'm not surprised, and it's sad that I'm not surprised.
and well, it's like I gotta call out some names and take some receipts here because this was a local prosecutor. This happened under Jeff Gettings' office, and what happened here was you had 2 court-appointed psychiatrists said that this kid was not competent to stand trial. The third psychiatrist said they basically kept going through psychiatrists until they said they found one who was willing to try a mentally disabled child as an adult.
Remember, folks, that this kid is 16.
He's 15 at the time. He's now 16.
He's 15 at the time. He's 16 now, and they want to try him as an adult because he got into a physical altercation with a teacher.
Not that the teacher started.
Yeah, that the teacher started. Not that he brought a gun to school. Not because he had a knife. It wasn't because he shot up some people. It's not because he was doing armed robbery. It's because him and his teacher wanted to knuck if you buck. And if you're old enough to understand that reference, then boy, I just aged myself. Yeah. But it's because the fisticuffs happen. Like if you had a scrap with your teacher. Maybe when we went to Lori Norrick's, if you had a scrap with your teacher, you weren't going to go to prison or go to jail for it. You would have went to juvie.
Well, particularly this kid's mental health disorder that the teacher was well aware of. Basically, what happened, Isaiah was anxious. The teacher put his hands on him, and he responded like it was a threat. Now, typically in a situation like that, you have a meeting. Like the child, the child in question has a meeting with like mental health professionals and his teaching staff, and they figure out they use it as like a learning moment to be like, okay, how do we prevent that from happening again? Right. This kid was kept without trial for a year in the Kalamazoo County Juvenile Home. They wanted to try him as an adult. This would have been like a 10-year felony. So here's the good news, bad news. The good news is that they let Isaiah, they're going to let him come home. But in order to do that, they basically gave him no other option. His family had to plead no contest so that he could get his butt home and get the mental health support that he actually needs. And that means that also he's basically going to be in the criminal justice system until he's at least 19 years of age. And the people who kept him locked up in a year, again, like Jeff Getting, who is a Democrat, by the way, the Democratic prosecutor here in Kalamazoo County, they're directly responsible for this disproportionate treatment. And again, as somebody who's been in the mental health system for about 10 years, this is not how this normally happens. When you talk about the school to prison pipeline, talk about racial disparity, there is a reason like this low income black mentally disabled kid was treated in a substantially different way than, say, a white mentally disabled kid from Portage, or even like the more well-off neighborhoods in Kalamazoo would be. Nora.
To give an example, so one of the reasons this story hits particularly hard with me, and I mentioned this the time that Ed Genesis was talking about this story sometime last year, is the fact that my youngest brother is also named Isaiah. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, he's also white, and we're from a suburbanite family, and he's not particularly mentally disabled. Like, he's also much younger than 16, but that's beside the point. This would have been unthinkable to happen, like, to someone like him in a neighborhood like that one I grew up in. Like, it'd be completely out of the question. The fact that this is happening is just so egregious, and, like, to think of that, like, happening to someone's, to happen to anyone, to happen to someone's kid, to happen to someone's sibling, like, it just breaks my heart to see. And, like, I went to a part of the court case. I couldn't stay for the whole thing because it took forever for the judge to get there in the first place, which also shows you what kind of contempt the legal system has for, black and underclass, people targeted by these sorts of policies. But it goes to the point that y'all were just saying. This wouldn't have happened to somebody of a different background.
Come on, guys. We have precedent for this. You don't remember the white kid who had the white boy who killed people, and he had affluenza?
That's
he was mentally ill. He murdered people, flew to another country to escape trial, and he had affluenza. Like, if he had affluenza, why can't this young black kid have brocolepsy? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it makes me. It's not surprising because, and this is the thing that I want all the viewers, all the people who are going to listen to this or listen to this or hear this. Do you think it was a lie? Before Black Lives Matter, do you think it was a lie when black folks said that we are being disproportionately treated worse in our criminal justice system? Do you think that all black people got together and to push this collective lie? Seriously? Like, do y'all think that it was do you think that we all got together and was like, we're gonna create this lie today that we're gonna push for centuries?
I mean, there are thing is, like, there are right-wing books, and I think I even saw one at the library where that's the thesis. Like, there's this one book. I obviously haven't read it because
some people believe the Earth is flat.
Yeah, it's like there's a right-wing book called Black Lives Matter, and like the whole thesis is like, black people are just making this up.
Again,
pull themselves up by the bootstraps.
Yeah, no, here's the thing. This is the thing that makes this upsetting. Well, the good news is that he wasn't tried as an adult. Mm-hmm. That's the good news. But. And also, Nora, to your point, if this was to happen to a white kid, the white kid would never been tried on trial in the first place.
No,
he would never been tried as an adult in the first place if he hit a teacher.
There would be a meeting with the principal, the teacher, and like a mental health professional.
And then the kid would have been back in class the next day.
Yes, yeah.
Justin would have been back in class. Tyrone is getting sent. His ass is getting sent to juvenile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's the disparity that we have to deal with when it comes to not just talking about it nationally or statewide. We gotta talk about it locally, man. We have to express to our progressive prosecutors. I forgot the dude that you name dropped.
Oh yeah, well, if you mind, like, I was a little editorializing here. One of the reasons, like, I bring up specifically Jeff Gathing, he's the county prosecutor, is, I don't want y'all to, like, don't sleep on me, all right? y'all pay attention to what our politicians are doing, because Kalamazoo is ostensibly like a quote-unquote left-leaning, liberal, progressive city, but you got a prosecutor that tried to throw a teenage boy in prison for 10 years, and you've got a county sheriff who basically we had to twist his arm for an entire year to get him to agree not to cooperate with ICE. So So again, stay woke, folks. Yeah,
because people scheming. They ain't gonna try to catch you sleeping. Yeah. Right. That's right. For real. And that's the reason why, Andy, I'm glad you said. I'm glad you brought up his name, because honestly, I didn't know who the dude was. But this is when us as local activists, we have to hold him accountable. Like, yo, dude, you was about to send a 16-year-old to jail, to prison for 10 years because of an altercation, and you know he has mental health issues. And you got told by 2 out of 3 psychologists that told you that he was not mentally fit to stand trial, and you tried to send him to jail anyway. What is wrong with you? What agenda are you trying to push? We don't need you push whatever agenda that pushed you to do these actions. You need to stop and turn course. We need to have a conversation. And as black as activists in this city, we need to hold him accountable. We need to call his office. We need to sit down. If you see him in a restaurant, you see him walking down the street, you need to stop him and have a conversation with him to let him know that the community is watching his actions, and his actions is a reflection of us and our values.
100%. Oh, any other thoughts before we go? Let's go to break. Quick
hot takes for those who do not know. Over the weekend on Friday, there were 2 cases of police shootings that we have police officers that will not be going to trial. Stephon Clark and Mr. Crutcher, one in Sacramento, California. The other one was in the South, I think in Alabama. Both caught on videotape, both being horrendous, and both were being blamed for their own murder. Stephon Clark was notoriously egregious because the white woman that was supposed to be the DA was using the dead phone that they got off of this man's body after the police shot him 20 times, hit him 7 times, and let him bleed out for 7 minutes. And then they took the messages off of the phone that they got off his dead body to prove that he was suicidal and having problems with his relationship, to justify his murder, even though the police in the video said that he had a gun. They ran up on him without announcing who they were, said that he had a gun, suspect gun. He had a gun, and then they opened fire.
Worth mentioning, the Newark, California Attorney General stood by that DA in the process.
Yeah. So,
Happy March.
Yeah. So, when you see people rioting, and you see people, when we talk about Black Lives Matter, and you see people rioting, you see people upset, this is the reason why. Martin Luther King said it best. Riots are the voice of the voiceless. And when you are taking away people's voices, literally taking away their lives and not giving them the dignity and justice that they deserve, they're going to mess some things up. Because you gave them no other choice.
Can I just say, one other thing too, just like the one of the abstracts that comes out of that, what you just said, okay, let's suppose he was suicidal. What exactly does it say that, in modern America, if you're suicidal in a black man, all you have to do is call the police and stand and wait,
and they will oblige you.
Yeah,
they will oblige you, and also they will also justify your murder by saying you had marijuana in your system in a state that legalized marijuana. You know what I'm saying? It is. The other shooting, where the helicopter showed that the man had his hands up and he wasn't reaching in the car. He didn't have a weapon, and the other shooting was egregious because The man had his hands up the entire time. We saw it in the camera. The police chopper and the person that was recording it said, "Oh man, he looks like a bad guy," because he was a tall black guy. The white woman that shot him not only will not be prosecuted for it, she got a job working in the county, the next county over. She got paid to murder a guy because she thought that her life was in danger when the man still had his hands up in the air. And she is working as a police officer in a county next to the one where she just murdered somebody. Mm-hmm. The gypsy cops of our country. Mm-hmm. That is the other reason why this is egregious. If you have just got done killing someone, even if our judicial system says that you are justified in said murder, and the community does not want you around there, you don't deserve to be a police officer anymore.
No.
And if you lie, like they did with Laquan McDonald, if you lie like they did with Stephen Clark, or Mr. Crutcher, or the other kid that got shot in 2017 in Chicago, where he was running away from the police, and the police said that he was being the aggressor. No. You do not get to be a police officer anymore. Those days are over, and we need to make that a priority and principle in America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. All right. Anything from you, Nora, before we go to break?
Nope.
All right. Okay, this is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Campus Outreach is looking for... Hang on. College radio can pretty much be summed up in 5 words.
89.1 FM, Radio Evolution.
Dead air. Dead air.
Voting is important. From deciding Kalamazoo's best drunk food to picking the fan favorite for Wider's Battle of the Bands, voting allows people to voice their opinions and change their world. To vote for offices such as mayors, senators, and the president takes a little more than a link to a Google Forms survey. Before you vote, you have to register. This can be done in person, by mail, and, in many states, online. For more information, you can point your favorite web browser to vote.gov.
Wider's 2019 Battle of the Bands is supported by Rupert's Brewhouse. Rupert's is located on 773 West Michigan Avenue in Kalamazoo. Rupert's offers daily specials on food and drink as well as live entertainment weekly. To find out more information, you can visit rupertsbrewhouse.com or give them a call at 269-337-9911.
Hey, y'all, we are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So I think we'll spend this last half hour. We're going to dive into a couple of state-based issues, really primarily about the climate. And we're going to close out talking about Ilhan Omar and some foreign policy business. So let's lead off talking a little bit about, so there's this really interesting science article you brought up, Nora, and I also wanted to talk a bit about, the thing that's on everybody's minds, the gas tax. So I don't know which one of those we should really start with. I don't know if y'all got a preference, but...
I'd say, I guess a short version of what's, like, going on in terms of the Great Lakes specifically is the south areas of the Great Lakes are expanding and the more northern parts are contracting, which is like, taking away more land and usable area in like southwest Michigan and the Chicago area, around Milwaukee as well, around Cleveland and Toronto even.
So
and
the pollution that is in the Great Lakes, that's in the clean water of the Great Lakes, will be more heavily concentrated in the southern areas of the.
No, this is not so much about pollution as it is about the waters themselves expanding versus contracting because of the way the glaciers that created the Great Lakes in the first place have melted, and this is more to do with the effects of climate change and how that's going to affect the overall, status of the Great Lakes region as a sort of hub where people can still live semi-comfortably compared to many other parts of the world. However, it's gonna be one of the many ways it's gonna be different from what we're normally used to seeing it be, Mm-hmm. As for the gas tax, that's happening because who remembers when Gretchen Whitmer was running her campaign and you hear it all the time that she'd fix the damn roads?
Oh, let's fix those damn roads, yeah.
Well, I don't know if any of you have driven down Parkview recently or down the 94 between the state line and Benton Harbor, but there's some roads are not doing good. Like, it seems like they get worse and worse every year, also due to climate change, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But, see, her solution to this problem right now is putting a gas tax, but that would put gas prices that way disproportionately higher than any other state of the country when it's already, almost prohibitively expensive to have car insurance, which, by the way, you need to have in order to drive, in order to get around in a state with highly lacking public transportation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think too is like the subtext of this issue. This is really what separates the corporate Democrats from the true progressives. And you'll listen to economists and sociologists like Thomas Frank or Richard Wolff, who have both been very critical of the Democratic Party for this reason. And the reason is, ostensibly, a left party is supposed to advocate for, getting rich people to pay their fair share of taxes. And when you have a party that is beholden to those same interests, where is that tax money going to come from? Well, it's going to come in the form of regressive taxes that are a financial burden on the middle and lower class. And particularly, this is a perfect example of a regressive tax. It is going to most disproportionately affect and hurt the people who can least afford gasoline. It reminds me of another politician, Mr. Emmanuel Macron. What happened? What happened when he raised gas taxes on lower class people? Do you remember?
I heard that there was a lot of high level yellow vest manufacturing CEOs that had very mixed opinions about it.
I remember when you put higher taxes on the French. You know what I'm saying? They start making guillotines. That's not a thing that you want. Americans, we ain't got time to make guillotines. We just got guns. I'm sorry to cut y'all off, but the thing is that makes me upset about this issue with Gretchen is that it's not like we don't make money from the richest corporations that are in Michigan. Mm-hmm. So, what are the biggest industries in Michigan? You have the health industry, the prison industry, you have the education industry,
the auto industry.
You have the auto industry.
Nestle, who's pumping out our groundwater for pennies on the dollar.
Right. So, having those industries, so bringing back the movie tax cut that they had, right, or bringing back to bringing that back, legalizing marijuana so that we could have. We legalized marijuana in Kalamazoo, but legalizing marijuana in statewide would generate revenue that we can put into the infrastructure of the state.
And
there are
just for people who are a little confused by that, technically Michigan, it is legal in the entire state of Michigan to recreationally smoke, but many cities, kind of the more reactionary conservative ones, are putting laws on the books to restrict the actual sale of marijuana in their townships.
Not only that, even for the townships that aren't banning it, it's still going to be several months before they're able to get licensed, and that's not going to mean any tax revenue from that for longer than it should be, because our roads are in horrible disrepair, and a lot of that tax money was supposed to go to the schools and the roads.
Well, I mean, the other issue is to actually start having a business that so you can have a growery, a small business stuff. You need liquid, you need money, and you need a lot of it. And in our state makes it very hard for people who do not have money or or who cannot get a loan to stay that way. The issue that I have, and this is the thing with Gretchen, is that there are other ways that we can generate revenue in our state that doesn't affect the working class people. That doesn't affect the working class people the way that this tax credit will. It's only going to hurt people who are already struggling. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't make sense when we just had a federal tax cut that put a $2.1 trillion debt, that took $2.1 trillion from the average American, to then say, hey, we're gonna make something that you need to get by more expensive to get.
Yeah, and I'd also say from kind of a strategic level, I think we've been giving Gretchen a lot of props since she got in. I think this was a harsh reminder that there are certain things that she just is not able to do because of her corporate restraints, and that is the idea of taxing lower and middle class folks to fix the damn roads. Unfortunately, I think this is gonna come back to bite her in the next election. Not only is it a financial burden on some of the poorest people in Michigan, but whatever ostensible Republican they're gonna want to run against her in the next election, that is some significant ammunition. That is how right-wing demagogues win. Is when the left will not concede towards actually taxing the rich and instead tax middle and lower class people. That gives Republicans the perfect elbow room to come in and say, look at these Democrats, they're taxing the hell out of you. Vote for me, I won't tax you at all, but I will sell you out to every corporation in the state, but that's in the fine print. But
it's I think it draws more to a broader discussion of what I was talking about how owning a car in here, because largely because of insurance, is prohibitively expensive to a lot of people in this state, and this is really is going to exasperate that. How is anybody supposed to get around when we don't have a great bus system in any of our cities? We don't we don't have much in terms of inner city trains or buses. And even the Detroit airport doesn't really go that many places compared to a lot of the other major cities in the country. So how are you supposed to get anywhere, let alone to and from work, without being able to, do this, Transportation is a human right. It really is. And I think that needs to be more of a rallying call to a lot of leftists that I'm not really seeing as much.
Yeah, you know, it is always kind of an afterthought. Like, even when you're talking about stuff like the Green New Deal and how it proposes like high-speed rail, that's always like a very secondary issue to people when they're thinking about it. When, you know, really, yeah, we're much like healthcare and any other issue. Like, we are far behind having an actual like mass transportation infrastructure in this country, where, you know, most of our you know, companion countries in the West and Scandinavia and, you know, in places like Japan and China have had high-speed rail for years now. Yeah.
It is worth mentioning that there's been some development with high-speed rail in both Texas and California, but like in California, they're just like, it's like it's been an embarrassing like feet dragging game. There's supposed to be a huge high-speed rail that went all the way from San Francisco to San Diego, but it's kind of right in the middle of nowhere, right between, you know, SF and LA, like between like two smaller cities that people don't really like live in much, and even then it's not complete, and the federal funds got pulled out of it, and the governor's been dragging his feet. There's been less specific development with the one in Texas that's supposed to be between Austin, Houston, and Dallas-Fort Worth, but it's not like there's been an embarrassing fiasco with that yet. I mean, we'll see, but it's not looking super optimistic for that really happening in our country. But also consider the fact that a lot of the companies that manufacture the airplanes that are also defense contractors, like Boeing, for example, like you can see it on a lot of like info about passenger airplanes that like a lot of are made by Boeing, and they buy out our government. So of course they don't want us to have high-speed trains when they'd rather shove us into somewhere with no leg room and.
I mean, it's much more feasible for me to have you pay for convenience than for me to change my system of how I'm getting paid for efficiency. Like, if I'm already making money and I can squeeze you for every dime that you have, and this is the most efficient way that we have things right now, or this is what we say is the most efficient way, and I'm already making money on it, then I'm going to fight tooth and nail to keep it that way. That's the way that capitalism works. For most capitalists. The problem that we're having is when you see things like the problem that you have is that we need to look at the policies that are going on, and see how are they going to positively or negatively affect the meekest among you. And Gretchen, and this is the reason why Abdul al-Said would have been a better candidate, because if you are so willing to throw the people your own base under the bus, and you're so willing to do this and say that, well, this is and you're going to be using the excuse of this is going to be good for you later. Well, you've been working to make sure to fix the roads and stuff for over 15 years prior to this, and all you're doing is hurting people who voted for you. Like, don't get me wrong, was she definitely better than her Republican candidate? Absolutely. But this is not a good plan, in my opinion. It's not a good plan. And if this is my solution for it. You're gonna raise taxes on everyone else that has to pay 45 cents. Okay, cool. Then in your state, we're gonna end the subsidies to the oil companies that work in the state. And those subsidies that you would normally give to those Fortune 500 companies, the oil companies that are in the state, the subsidies that you would normally give them goes to fixing the roads. But I don't think she would do that.
I hope she would. I'm skeptical too. She has made like significant movement on a lot of others, and some others she's really dragged her feet with. I'm gonna say this is definitely one of them. I mean, it's not like she could have done much about the roads specifically in the crazy winter we've had, but like we really need to have a long-term solution to our roads, and sadly I don't think that'll ever happen.
All right, so in these last 10 minutes, do we want to pivot? There's been a big national story going on having to do with I want to highlight, again, like the big national controversy that's going on, but also some positive things that are coming out of D.C. And I'll let Lawrence, if you want to lead off. I'm of course referencing the dogpiling on of Ilhan Omar, who is, by the way, might just be my favorite of all the freshmen at this point. But go right ahead.
I don't know, man. Rashida was my favorite until she apologized. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, Rashida and AOC, like they all doing their thing. I'm just biased because Detroit versus everybody. But yeah. Rashida shouldn't apologize when she said, nah, dog, what you just did was racist, and you're being racist for even trying to say that's not racist.
And we don't have enough time to really deep dive into it, but a shout out to Rashida for there's an article out of the Detroit Free Press today where she's talking about how she will very soon put in the whatchamacallit to impeach
the mother,
the mother effer. Yeah,
she's putting in the paperwork for it.
Turning in her receipts, as we like to say on the program.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So here's the thing. For those who not know, Ilhan Omar, who's a representative out of Minnesota, I think.
Yes, Minnesota.
Minnesota, Minneapolis area specifically.
Who is a hijab-wearing Muslim woman, who talked about the influence of money in politics, which she talks about a lot, and she put her crosshairs on AIPAC a while back. People were saying to her, the Anti-Defamation League and other places got their panties in a bunch, where they do sometimes. Now, let me be clear, the Anti-Defamation League has done great work when it comes to fighting back against Islamophobia. The Anti-Defamation League can do better work when it comes to fighting against racist remarks against black people. And they do horrible jobs when it comes to trying to defend anti-Semitic tropes when people are having substantive conversations about the influence of AIPAC and other lobbying groups that are pushing the agenda for Israel. They're a lobbying group. What do lobbying groups do? They put money in the hands of politicians to influence their votes and policies to their agenda. AIPAC is no different from the NRA, which is no different from the big pharma lobbyists. The only difference is in their policies. So when Ilhan Omar said that, so she got in trouble because she questioned the relationship that America has with Israel when it comes to us funding Israel, and Israel recently breaking war crimes by killing innocent protesters and Palestinians in the Great March of Return. Just questioning the relationship that we have to a right-wing authoritarian dictator that is Benjamin Netanyahu, who is basically Dick Cheney, and he is the Dick Cheney of Israel. That's him and his policies. The policies that they put in place, from telling African immigrants that they have to leave the country or they will be rounded up and then deported, saying that they were infecting the country. That's his words, that I am not joking. Yeah. The former prime minister before him said that the Gaza Strip was basically apartheid state, and policies that he has put forth to fix that problem has only made things worse. He does not acknowledge the fact that the settlements are breaking international law, and the fact that when Israeli forces kill unarmed Palestinians, and that the settlements are blocking the ways of a two-state solution or peace, that he fails to acknowledge these things.
Yeah, and I do want to interject real quick. There was some very important news about this earlier this week. A UN investigative panel basically gave legal credence to all of these allegations, cited their terrible behavior during the March of Return, how they deliberately targeted journalists, medical personnel, people with disabilities, amputees.
They killed a 15-year-old nurse, man.
Yeah.
They killed a 15-year-old first medic.
And what's really unprecedented is this case is going to be forwarded to the International Criminal Court, which historically has been criticized for primarily only targeting African nations, not really holding Western powers' feet to the fire when they commit war crimes. So this is a potential, really big step. Big news. Yes.
I mean, what it is, it's the same thing. It's funny how art imitates life. What was that Dave Chappelle skit? Oh, the UN has a problem with what we're doing? Well, the UN can send their armies to deal with me. Oh, yeah, the UN doesn't have armies. We are the biggest army in the world. Mm-hmm. Do something about it. Mm-hmm. And that's basically how we roll. Yep. That might equals right. And to go back to Ilhan Omar, she said she questioned our policies and our responsibilities towards Israel. For that, Anti-Defamation League and all the right-wingers and also Democratic establishments all cracked down on her, which is BS, because she didn't say anything that was anti-Semitic. I would love for Ilhan Omar to have a town hall the same way that Bernie Sanders had a town hall on AJ Plus and now this with the Anti-Defamation League and say, what if you're saying that what I said was anti-Semitic, but you're not, and you did not come out and say when Trump said that the neo-Nazis that there were people on both sides that were
very
good.
Fine people.
Yeah. When Nazis killed a protester in America, when Jim Clyburn and some of the other Republicans were saying that George Soros and some of the other people and some of the other left-wing Jewish donors are trying to buy this election, when they literally put a Star of David on one of their ads against Hillary Clinton in the 2016 primary. If you have not actually called out that as something that we should be talking about when it comes to our body politics, but you're mad at me because I'm talking about money in politics that just happens to come from a Jewish organization, and I'm not condemning Judaism, I'm criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu and his policies, then what can I say when I am talking about money in politics that has to deal with these Jewish organizations? Because if you're saying that I can't say anything or that no substantive criticism is allowed, then you are giving the people who are anti-Semitic, who says that the Jews control the world, you're giving them legitimacy when they say these things.
Yeah, and also consider why is Ilhan Omar under all this fire for saying these comments that honestly are fairly innocuous, when so many other political figures can say things that are horribly anti-Semitic or anti-black or xenophobic or queerphobic. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, so Ilhan Omar, as we mentioned, she's a Muslim woman. She wears a hijab. She's also Somalian. Her parents, I believe, if not her grandparents, are immigrants. Why has the House not made more action against the likes of, say, Steve King? There's been a lot more anti-Semitic and also otherwise really horribly discriminatory politicians, but they're not really held to the fire like she is. And there's the money and politics reason why, but there's also the reason of her own identity why.
Yeah, this is the weaponization of Islamophobia to use as as a blanket to cover any criticisms of Israel. Because if we criticize Israel, that means we have to be accountable and responsible for the atrocities that we've been helping them commit. That also means that we would have to be responsible for the things that we have been doing associated with them. In America has a long history of wanting racial reconciliation without actually dealing with the fact of what they did to put people in that situation in the first place. It's the reason why Green Book won the Oscar over Black Panther. It's how America deals with things, man. We want the baby, but we don't want the labor pains.
Yeah.
We want the privilege of the songs, but we don't want we want the great song of R&B and blues, but we don't want the trouble that made said song. That's how America rolls, and it's upsetting because they're trying to crush the free speech rights of this young woman, where they were celebrating her when she won. And the thing that pisses me off the most is the same people who was yelling at AOC saying that we shouldn't be cannibalizing our own people, the DNC, we shouldn't be attacking our own people, are now the same people throwing Ilhan Omar under the bus.
Exactly. There's the hypocrisy right there.
It's disgusting, man.
Yeah.
It's absolutely disgusting.
All right. We are a little bit over time. Nora, any final thoughts?
Vaccinate your kids.
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about that more, I'm sure.
Man.
So I'm going to let y'all know a couple things coming up later this week. Stick this on your social justice calendar tomorrow. Over at K College, specifically over at the Hornet Suite in the Field House, that's 1600 West Michigan Avenue.
Right by Western's campus.
Yeah, right by Western's campus. There's going to be a school discipline and mass incarceration reform forum. It's at 4:15 p.m. There's going to be some really great speakers, Dr. Charles Bill Kubota, Cindy Green, so on and so forth. And it's going to be a real good deep dive into issues involving the school-to-prison pipeline, mass incarceration, and all of that. And then also coming up this week, Saturday, March 9th, over at Water Street Coffee Joint. If you want to talk to some of our local elected officials, Meredith Place, Mike Quinn, and Portage City Council person Chris Burns are going to be at the Water Street Coffee Joint on Center Street. That's going to be from 9 to 11 a.m. And also coming up on Sunday, March 10th, the Kalamazoo Socialist Party is doing their local meeting from 2 o'clock to 4 p.m. at the Vine Neighborhood Association. Again, I want to thank y'all for tuning in. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. One last plug. Our dear friend Issa Smith, we've talked about her situation on the show. Her and her family were unscrupulously kicked out of their house last month. She has an active GoFundMe running. We will link to it in the show notes. But yeah, anything you could do to help them out would be very much appreciated. Still need to collect some ducats to kind of get by and hold them over until, knock on wood, they get that new house. So thanks again for tuning in. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. And until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.